Thank you for inviting me to come and speak to you on this lovely Sunday morning. As Margaret said, my name is Hannah Reeve. I'm a member of North Ryde Uniting Church in northern Sydney. I've been part of the Uniting Church my whole life, and I'm a minister's kid. I'm also one of the national co-conveners of Uniting Network, our Uniting Church LGBTIQ and Ally Network, and I was a member of the National Assembly in July last year. So today I'm going to, at the end of this Mardi Gras season, I'm going to share a reflection on the Uniting Church's journey towards marriage equality from my unique perspective. 7 months ago, I stood up in front of 300 people at the Assembly down in Melbourne to put a case to why the Uniting Church should extend its definition of marriage to include all couples. Myself and Reverend Ben Gilmore, with the help of many members of Uniting Network, wrote a proposal to ensure that inclusive marriage was on the agenda. To me, advocating for an inclusive definition of marriage in our civil law and within our church was something I had to do. It was personal. My partner Kate and I wanted to get married, and we knew it was the right thing to do. I had never dreamed of a big white wedding as a kid, but I had valued marriage as an important covenant between two people and God, as a commitment and one of life's milestones. This morning we heard the reading about the wedding at Cana from John's Gospel. Jesus, as a respected rabbi, and some of his disciples get invited to this wedding, as it's an important gathering in the community that could, go for multiple days. Jesus, in the end, saves the party from disaster and an early end when the wine runs out. But to me, this wedding 2,000 years ago, as a central ritual in that society of the time, and this serious community celebration, reminds me that even as marriage has changed over time from an inter-family arrangement to a commitment of two equal and loving partners, there is a special place for it in our culture and within our church community, and that has not changed. Marriage equality for my relationship and for others like mine was something worth fighting for. The Uniting Church has been discussing sexuality for decades, and many of you here would know that history better than I do. I've been a member of the last 4 assemblies, so I've been part of some of those discussions over the years. At the 2012 Assembly, a decision was made to specifically talk about marriage. And then in 2015, Assembly refocused this consultation and resourcing onto the same-gender marriage was the term used, with the hope to bring some proposals back to the 2018 meeting. Consultation continued, which is very Uniting Church, and then in March last year, a final proposal came out from the Assembly, and there was a final round of consultation, and the proposal was talked about in presbyteries, and some of you may have been involved in that in your presbytery or here in your congregation. And that proposal was actually similar to the one Ben and I had put forward that had an inclusive definition of marriage, and this sparked a range of passionate responses around the church in the lead up to the Assembly. An assembly is an intense setting. You meet for 7 days straight, mostly 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. You worship and you participate in Bible studies. You sit in smaller groups in the afternoons to discuss key agenda items and give feedback. And then there's a facilitation group that collects and synthesizes all the responses to help shape new proposals. It's a business meeting, but there's a sense of community and of discernment. It was the second night of that meeting that I had a chance to present our proposal with the 7 proposals on marriage. And it was important to have a proposal by 2 out Assembly members and to remind everyone present that this was not some abstract issue that we were discussing, that it's about real people in our church and in our families and people who were in that meeting. Just want to share a couple of words I said on that night. There's a space now for leadership. There's a space to use our voice as a church to call out to those who have been hurt and marginalised in our name, to be radical and inclusive as Jesus was, to welcome into the same place of worship those with whom we don't necessarily agree. On a personal note, there are many people in congregations waiting and praying during these discussions. A couple who would rather be married by a minister than a civil celebrant, in a church rather than a park or function centre, or a minister who cares for a couple and supports a couple and would choose to marry them if they could, or a child who wonders if their parents will get married someday. So after the feedback session the following day, it was clear there was no consensus among Assembly members on any of the proposals and that more discussion was needed. And from that, the two-definition proposal came out of the processes. And although initially I was frustrated that we couldn't keep pushing for full inclusion, I knew some compromise was the only way forward. Hours of debate, tears, worry, not enough sleep, continued for 4 more days until finally, after a series of votes, the proposal was passed and the Uniting Church finally had a definition of marriage that was between 2 people. My wife, Kate, and I had planned a wedding for September last year. We'd made a decision that it was the right time for us, no matter what the church said, really. We'd had a relationship blessing in 2011 at Gordon Uniting Church, which was the congregation that we met as youth leaders on the North Shore of Sydney. And we were blessed to be in a congregation where our relationship was supported and where we had continued to be in leadership for many years. So when the proposal passed, we were overjoyed that we could have our Uniting Church wedding and that my mum, who is a Uniting Church minister, could perform it and that it could happen in the church where we met. That Friday evening on the 21st of September, I walked down the aisle, hand in hand with Kate, with tears of joy that this, our special day, our real wedding, could finally take place. It was the moment I had been working for, and it was amazing. Unfortunately, in October, things got messy again when correspondence went out to Uniting Church ministers that a mechanism to halt the Assembly decision, the Clause 39B, you might have heard that term, could have been invoked if more than 50% of our state bodies, our synods, or 50% of our regional bodies within those state bodies, our presbyteries, had voted to do this. It had already occurred by that stage in a few presbyteries, and then ministers were being told to prepare for that potential scenario. Now that period was an incredibly hard time for many. It's a different feeling potentially having a right taken away than probably not having it at all. There had been a cumulative impact from the postal survey, pre-assembly discussions, assembly itself, and now there was this hurdle left, this new hurdle, and many were feeling tired and broken. I had friends with weddings planned in November and December, living in a sense of uncertainty, and there was nothing I could do except support them and try to get as much information out of assembly leaders as I could through my role in Uniting Network. I felt a bit guilty. How did we get our wedding at the right time when others might have the hard choice of using a civil celebrant or postponing their ceremony until after more consultation? When only one more synod was needed to get that stop across the line, it was essentially down to South Australia. They met in November and didn't make a decision, and then met again in January. This waiting over the Christmas period weighed on many, but at least some weddings could continue happening in that time. And when South Australia decided not to invoke this clause, there was a great sense of relief. Our inclusive definition would stand. I could breathe again. So why put yourself through this, some might ask? Why go to numerous church meetings and invest time and emotional energy into things when there's a likelihood of failure and a definite personal cost? Well, our reading from 1 Corinthians today reminds us that the Spirit of God works within us all. We are all affirmed, and we are all gifted in some way. We must listen to the call of God working in our lives. For me, I see the Spirit of God working within me in the journey I took for those 6 years through the various meetings and through those church processes, and giving me the strength and resilience to keep advocating for change. And I believe it was the Spirit working in that assembly meeting in July last year that helped us discern the decision that we made. We all have God working in us, gifts to bring and a part to play. We're all passionate about something and can speak up for justice or support those who do. There's normally a cost to pay, and there are hurdles along the way, but it's worth it. I have great respect for a lot of you here at Pitt Street who have led the way in terms of inclusion and continuing to speak out for injustice, and I thank you for your advocacy. Last night, the Uniting Network contingent declared that love wins and marched in Mardi Gras under the theme, Fearless, Fabulous Weddings. Following our marriage decision, we have the opportunity as the Uniting Church to connect with the community and to show them that we are all welcome and we are all loved by God in a way that most other denominations can't. We can be the voice of hope. We can be the voice of hope when many other Christian voices are voices of judgment and shame. The Uniting Church took another step forward. It might not be full inclusion, and there still might be more to go, but it's another step. May we continue stepping forward together.